it has come to my attention that we need to do a step 0 in our gender identity and presentation seminar. I am not showing you all the comments that have been filtered, and that's mostly because I don't want fights to break out and people to be distracted from learning, which is the point here. And step 0 is that gender is different from biological sex. Now, all of you who have completed step 1 and 2 probably have already understood this, at least on some level. Because step 1 was about how gender roles, the expectations that society places on us as to distinctive tasks we should undertake or preferences we should have in our everyday life, is distinct from biological sex. Step 2 is about how gender identity is something that we feel inside. And it seems that for some of you, it's difficult to distinguish that from your biological anatomy. You people who are having a hard time with that seem to be a minority of the class. Most people have understood the assignments, have given answers that show that you have understood the assignments, but let's do a little bit of remedial work for those who are having a hard time with that step. And there are 2 possible ways to go about it. If you are stuck with the belief that your gender identity is exactly the same as your biological anatomy, I'm not saying aligned. Aligned is fine. Aligned is the majority of the population. But things can be aligned without being the same thing. So, for example, many people who are parents are also happy. That does not mean that being happy and being a parent are the same thing. Many people who are students are also smart. But it does not mean that being a student and being smart are the same thing. You get the gist. So if you are having a hard time distinguishing your gender identity and your biological anatomy, there are 2 exercises you might try. The first exercise would be to imagine that for some reason, any reason, you are being tasked with presenting as another gender in your everyday life. How much of a betrayal would that feel like? How much not you would that feel like? If you feel like it would be quite strongly not you to be asked to present as another gender in your everyday life, then you probably have pinpointed your gender identity. This is what gender identity feels like. And it's likely that you will now be able to distinguish it from your biological anatomy, because you could imagine that you were asked to pretend something else about yourself. So, for example, you might be commanded to dye your hair, or to spend a day at a different job, or to stand in as a relative for a friend who is really not your relative, or to play the role of someone who has a disease that you actually don't have. And then you can compare how much not you all these different scenarios might be compared to having to pass as a different gender. But you might also simply read the comments under the previous videos in this series and try and understand what other people are talking about when they give a number from 0 to 10 about how strongly they feel their gender identity. Because possibly you're actually among those who don't feel their gender identity so strongly. Maybe you're referring to your biological anatomy because that's all you've got, because you don't really feel gender strongly. And that might just be how things are. You don't feel your gender identity strongly, and you don't feel strongly that it would be not you to present as a different gender. Maybe you are just among the people who have the cursor, the line really low. Maybe you just have a low intensity gender identity, and that does happen. Yeah, could just be you. Yeah.